Welcome everyone to another live episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon, South Carolina Legal Services is leveling up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. This week, we are continuing our series on identity theft with part 2. But before we do that, I just want to remind you that this is not legal advice. It's just general information for the public. But we do hope that you can find value in it, share it with others, because it certainly is important information, because identity theft is a real serious problem, certainly in our country, but all over the world. And today we'll be talking about the South Carolina law regarding identity theft. And part 2 is really covering repairing the damage after you have suffered identity theft, but also just reviewing over some things that you can do if you've been a victim or if you think you might be a victim. So we'll be talking about that. So part 2, repair the damage. Just a reminder for everyone that you can apply for our services here at South Carolina Legal Services for this and other matters that we might handle. There's no guarantee that your case is accepted, but we sure hope that you will apply if you do need a lawyer. Our services are free for those who are eligible under the various grants that we have. And also, of course, if you have not connected with us on social media, I really encourage you to do that. There's a lot of good information that you will find there. And if you scan that QR code, you can sign up for getting emails about this and other resources that we have. So definitely encourage everyone to do that. So last week was identity theft part 1. If you missed that first section of the series, it is up on our YouTube channel, where we put all of the recordings of these Level Up Law episodes. So if you want to find out about that or any other area of law that we practice in, maybe find out what some of our partners are doing, I do encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and check out the Level Up Law page there. So today we're going to go to identity theft part 2 and talk about repairing the damage that may have been done to your credit. Okay. So first of all, to repair a security breach or some kind of identity theft, there are some things that you can do, and we'll give you some references at the end that have a lot of detail about what to do. But the main things that we want to be sure that you do if you have suffered a breach or identity theft is, number 1, close any new accounts that were opened in your name by the identity thief or anyone that wasn't you. Any charges on your account that are not yours, that are fake or bogus or whatever, make sure that those get removed. Be sure to correct your credit report if you've gotten your credit report, and you can still do that for free on annualcreditreport.com. And also, we talked last time about fraud alerts and credit freezes. You can consider using an extended one of those that goes for a long period of time. They can be lifted, and actually you can also remove them as well, but definitely consider that. I know sometimes people have had multiple incidents of identity theft over time, and sometimes that's just what you need to do. And of course, you always want to change your password or any other identifying information on accounts that you already had, and maybe even close them and open them with a new account number. And all those things you can do in conjunction with your bank or other lending institution, credit card company, and so forth. They all have fraud departments that can help you with that. Okay, so now that we've talked about those, I wanted to talk about our South Carolina law on consumer identity theft protection. So you might not realize that we actually have our own law that covers identity theft and protecting you beforehand and in some cases after. So we're going to go through some of the provisions of that law that I think you'll find interesting and helpful. And keep in mind that often when it comes to consumer protection laws, we have state laws that sort of mirror federal laws. And so a lot of what is in our state law, you can also find in the federal law, such as the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So let's start with number one, which I think is really important, first section in our identity theft protection law, and that is the requirement that creditors verify addresses. So if they, for example, send out, you often get all these credit card applications in the mail, and don't just toss those, shred them, because you don't want someone sending in an application for a credit card in your name. And what this provision does is requires a card issuer or seller or lender to look at that address, and if it's not the same one on the application that they sent the application to, then they have to verify that address, and mainly that's by contacting the person that they sent that offer to. And then if there's any other reasonable means that they have available to them to figure that out. I think it's a really good protection because there are so many credit card offers and loan officers that are going out constantly, and consumers like you are receiving those. And if someone takes that out of your mailbox and uses it in a nefarious way, then this can be protected. So if that creditor or lender does receive a request for a change of the cardholder's billing address, like if I call my credit card company and say, hey, I have a different address, or someone acting like me calls and says, hey, I have a different address, then within no more than 30 days after that, if they receive a request for an additional credit card, they can't issue that, okay? And they will not mail the credit card, the additional credit card, to the new address. They will not activate an additional credit card until and unless it is verified that that is a proper change of address. And so that's sort of on the creditor to adhere to this law and always check these addresses if there's a change, because that would be a typical thing that an identity thief would do, right? They would just call and say, oh, I need you to send that bill to my new address, and here it is. And maybe they've got your information, so they're able to get through that, security process with a credit card company, for example. But then if within 30 days they get a request for a new card or additional card, then that should alert them, right, that it's a problem. And just a note here that this particular section does not apply when it's under the Fair Credit Reporting Act and someone is disputing or giving a discrepancy, maybe. So there is some interaction between our identity theft law and the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Okay. Now, this I think is an important part of the law that I wanted to be sure that everyone knows about, and that is that if you do suspect you're the victim of identity theft, you can go to law enforcement and initiate an investigation by reporting it. Okay? And if you'll notice here in the last sentence of this part of the law enforcement agency shall take your report, and they will provide you with a copy of the report, because you may need that to send to your bank or your credit card company or whoever that you need to prove identity theft with. and then they will begin an investigation. So I think it's important to know that don't let anybody with law enforcement blow you off if you're wanting to make a identity theft report. It's important that that be made. You can do it with local law enforcement. You can also make a report with the Federal Trade Commission, which has law enforcement authority. But just keep in mind that the local law enforcement agency that has jurisdiction, like where you live, like where your apartment, house, home is located, whichever law enforcement is there. It might be city police, it might be county sheriff, but you go and make that report and they have to investigate. Sometimes you don't have a lot that you can tell them, but they still have to investigate to the degree of it. Okay. This is a really important part of the law as well, where maybe someone has stolen your identity and then they have committed a crime, but they're using your identity. And so when they get charged and maybe even convicted, then they might be using your name. So when a person is convicted of unlawfully obtaining and using the personal identifying information without authorization, and there's a particular law, criminal law on that, the court records must reflect the victim identity theft did not commit the crime. Okay? So you have some responsibility there if you know that your identity has been stolen. And if the person was arrested and convicted of using your identity, and your identity is mistakenly associated in any way with those criminal records, then you can petition the court for an expedited determination of what they call your factual innocence. And all you have to do is to provide documentation like the identity theft report to the police, an affidavit from you, your identifying information, and there's a whole list in there of things that they can require, but you don't have to have a big long criminal trial because they usually already done that. And the County Office of Victims Assistance can do that for you as well. You can petition yourself, but they can help you with that, and I think that's part of what they do and what they want to help with. And so, as long as the court determines there's no reasonable cause to believe that you were the person that committed the crime, they'll issue an order that certifies that, and then they will expunge that conviction in your name. So that's a really important thing that you can do if you find yourself in this situation. Now, if in your petition to the court there is any misrepresentation, material misrepresentation, or fraud, then the court can later on vacate that order that they issued if they find that that's the case. Okay. Also, part of this law required SLED, our state law enforcement division, to establish and maintain records of identity theft victims. So those records can be accessed by obviously the criminal justice agencies here in our state, but then also you as a victim. So that's a way for you to establish that you are a victim. So you can submit your information after you get that police report, you can submit that to SLED, and you have to include the copy of the police report, a full set of your fingerprints, and any other information that they're requiring at the time that can, change from time to time, but they'll let you know what else they may need. And then they shall verify your identity against driver's license and other ID records at the DMV. So I think that's really important. provision that we have in our law to help you record in an important way that you're a victim of identity. Okay. Our South Carolina identity theft law also provides for security freezes, which we talked about in episode 1 of this series. But if you have reason to believe that you're the victim of financial identity fraud, you can request a security freeze showing that police report, or if you have filed a complaint under the South Carolina Personal Financial Security Act, which is the criminal statute that I mentioned. Consumer Reporting Agency, or what we refer to as the CRA, shall place the freeze on your consumer file within 5 days of you requesting it. Okay, so they got to do it on the money, and they have to disclose to you once you do that, whatever their process is for placing the freeze, removing the freeze, or if you need to temporarily lift it because you're needing to, whatever, maybe buy a car or something like that, and you need it to be lifted so that your credit can be checked. So they have to give you all that information about how you do that. And that way, your credit can be checked if you need it to be. Also, part of this section is that within 10 days of receiving your request, that Consumer Credit Reporting Agency shall send you written confirmation that the freeze has been placed and provide you with a unique personal identification number or a password to authorize action by you on that account, whether it's to remove it or temporarily lift it and so forth. And they also have to provide to you a disclosure about how you can replace that number or that password if you need to do that, if you've lost it or forgotten it or it got stolen by somebody, whatever, then you know how to get a replacement number. Okay. Now, this section is important to know about if you are a protected consumer or you represent a protected consumer. So a protected consumer is someone who is under the age of 16. And that has to be when at the time a security freeze is requested. And then the other way you can be a protected person is if you're incapacitated somehow and have been appointed a guardian or conservator. And those folks can also ask for the security freeze on your behalf to make sure that everything is covered. The idea there is that underage individuals or people who can easily be have their identity stolen because they're incapacitated somehow. Those are real targets for identity thieves, and so we need to have that provision of how you can on their behalf. So, like if you're the parent, you can request a security freeze if someone has stolen your child under 16 identity. So this section does provide for that. And here's what your representative, whether it's guardian, conservator, parent, what they have to provide to the Consumer Reporting Agency. Well, first of all, they have to do it in the manner that that CRA requires. And they have to have sufficient proof of the protected person's ID, but also the ID of the guardian or conservator representative. And also sufficient proof of the authority to act on that person's behalf. So if you've been appointed as a guardian, there's going to be an order appointing you as guardian. That's what they're talking about there. If you have been appointed as conservator of someone's money, that appointment of conservator is, what they're going to need, and probably a certified copy of that, which is not too hard to get. Now, if the person doesn't have a credit report or a record, the Consumer Reporting Agency shall create a record for them. And that way, that is, established in a private way, so that in the future, a thief can't create a record for someone. And this especially happens, with children. So the freeze has to be placed within 30 days of receiving the request and those documents that are required. And that is going to remain in effect until and unless the protected consumer or their representative submits a request move the freeze or to lift the freeze. And once they receive that request, that has to be done within 15 days. There's all these different amounts of time that are required, so it's important to know where to find these if you're in this situation. Also, again, as in the previous section, if the Consumer Reporting Agency or CRA finds out that the freeze was placed or the record was created based on a material misrepresentation of fact, then they can remove the freeze if they find that out. So they can do that without you even requesting it. And also important to know that when you are getting a security freeze or having a record like that created, there is no charge to you as the consumer or as the authorized representative. All right. Now, disputing the accuracy of consumer records. And here's some of the penalties for that. And again, this in some ways mirrors the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is a federal law. So you can dispute the accuracy of an item in your credit report by giving notice in writing to that CRA. And of course, this is after you've requested your credit report, you've gotten the copy of it, and you reviewed it, and you say, oh, this is not right, this isn't me, or this isn't my debt, or whatever's on it. I never lived at this address, anything like that. So you have to specifically notify in writing the CRA and let them know specifically what's the inaccuracy in the report. And then they shall, okay, they don't get to choose, they shall, under the law, reinvestigate the inaccuracy, and that's at no charge to you. And they have to then provide you sufficient evidence that that information is true and accurate, but if it's true and accurate. But they also have to record the current status of that disputed information. So if they're investigating, they have to put that on the report, that it's been disputed and it's being investigated. And they also shall provide the forms that are required for you to give them this notice when you're making a dispute. And they have to assist you in preparing the notice if you ask, okay? So you got to ask. And if you ask and they don't assist you, then that would be a violation of this law. So it's important to know that they do have to assist you with that. So once they receive the notice, they've got to deny or admit the inaccuracy within 30 days. So that's how long they have to do that investigation. And they have to either admit it or deny it in writing for you, okay? Because they've got to give you the particular information about the investigation and why they did it. So, or why they've made the decision that they've made. So if your dispute is denied, then they have to include this information with the written result that they send to you, okay? The basis for the denial, a copy of your file that shows that it was investigated, including all the information about the furnisher of the alleged disputed information. They have to provide you a notice if you request it, that provides you with a description of the procedure that they used when they were investigating to determine the accuracy and the completeness of that information on your report. So they got to tell you how they checked it out, and they got to tell the truth about how they checked it out. And then they also have to give you sufficient evidence that the information is true and accurate as it relates to you, and that's why they denied your dispute. So it's important that you closely review what they send to you after you make a dispute, and make sure that it's done in conjunction with our own state law that we're reviewing here. Okay, how about if they admit the dispute and admit that it's inaccurate information after they do their investigation? They shall correct the item. Okay, they shall correct that item in your records, and they have to inform anyone who has received that report in the last 6 months. So if somebody's checked your credit and they've gotten a credit report on you that includes that inaccurate information, then the CRA has to notify them, if it's been in the last 6 months, that that was in fact inaccurate. Now, probably too late by then to do you any good, but it does, it certainly needs to be done, and then that's in that record. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that also under this identity theft protection law in South Carolina, there are penalties, damages, even attorney's fees and costs that you can get if the chapter is violated. Any of these provisions in the chapter are violated. So if someone knowingly and willfully violates any of the provisions of this chapter, then penalties can be imposed. The person can be held liable for 3 times the amount of your actual damages, or $3,000 for each incident, whichever is greater, and then also attorney's fees and costs. So if you have an issue with identity theft or a violation of this statute, you can have your attorney paid by the CRA or anyone who has violated the chapter. So in addition to that, the CRA or anyone else who negligently violates this chapter is liable for either the actual damages that you incur or $1,000 for each incident, instead of that higher amount. This is if it's just negligence. But also, again, attorney's fees and costs are available there as well. So, in addition to that, if your injury is to your credit worthiness, credit standing, all these things that you see here, maybe not only your reputation, employment options, our credit reports are getting checked for everything these days. So if you are subjected to this and the failure of the CRA is not corrected within 10 days after the judgment that you might get for their failure to take that inaccurate information off of the credit report, within 10 days of entry of a judgment in your favor for damages, those damages that were assessed in that judgment must be increased to $1,000 each day until the inaccurate information is removed from your record. So there's great incentive. Well, you would think it would be great incentive. $1,000 a day is probably not that much to them, but $1,000 a day is a lot of money, and every day that goes by, $1,000 is added until they remove that inaccurate information from your credit report. Also, you have the right to file a civil action in civil court and ask that the CRA be enjoined and restrained from any future acts constituting a violation of this act. So you have that right as well. Just a note here at the bottom of this slide to make sure that you know that these rights that you have under our state law are cumulative, and they're in addition to any other claims that you might have, whether it be under federal law or some other statute, or if there's been other action that may have been taken by the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. It does not apply to a person who actually acts reasonably. So if a court finds that a person or agency did not act willfully or negligently, as described in those first couple of paragraphs, and that they acted reasonably under the circumstances, then this is not going to apply to them. So those are important to prove. Okay, and I just also wanted to mention before we close, there are a couple of other provisions of this law. One has a great number of restrictions on publication of your Social Security number. You know, we give our Social Security number on a lot of things these days, whether it be a loan application, a medical provider, and any number of things. And so there's a list there in the statute of all the ways that your Social Security number cannot be published or used in any way. And one of the important things there is that, you know, lots of times they want to know the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. So that's allowed. 6 numbers or less seems to be allowed under this provision. But there's also some exceptions, and those tend to be in the category of things like government issues, child support, collection, and some of those types of things. You can be required to provide your Social Security number, and they can share it under certain exceptions, but they can't just put it out there in the public record. And just a note on that, I have had in the past situations where clients unwittingly may have filed an answer to a lawsuit, and in the lawsuit they're explaining why they can't pay the debt or something like that, and they unwittingly put their Social Security number. Or maybe they say, oh, here's my, you know, disability letter that shows how much money I get, which is very little, and it has their, you know, either all or part of their Social Security number on there. And so sometimes the attorney who filed the lawsuit that you're sending the answer to, if you're filing that answer on your own, you know, representing yourself, they may just file it for you. And then they have put that into the public record with your Social Security number out there for everyone to see. So be very careful about what you put your Social Security number on and any of your other identifying information. Even if you are, you know, being sued for a credit card debt and there was fraud and maybe there was a report that you have, be careful about filing that report in that action, because it may actually contain your personal information. There's also some requirements in this statute about disposing of business records and the responsibility of companies who have your Social Security number to destroy their records that contain that. So that's really important. You want to always make sure when maybe a company closes, or maybe a doctor's office is closing or joining a different practice or something like that, you want to make sure that they are preserving your rights when it comes to your Social Security number and other information as well. So this section provides some requirements for those companies. So the other thing that I did want to mention in this identity theft law for South Carolina is this section on penalties for CRAs if they violate the chapter. So in addition to any other penalties that might be imposed on them, the CRA or any other person that willfully violates a provision of this chapter, liable for 3 times the amount of actual damages or not more than 1,000, whichever is greater, along with reasonable attorney's fees and costs. Very similar to the provision that we just previously went over. But this is not just on the issue of the properly disputing and finding that there is an inaccuracy or there's not, and failure to correct an inaccuracy has these similar penalties, damages, etc. This is for any violation of this chapter. So it's negligently violating the chapter. It's your actual damages and reasonable attorney's fees and costs. In addition, if the injury is to your creditworthiness, your ability to get a job and so forth, your eligibility for insurance, that whole laundry list of things, and it's because of a failure to place a security freeze, and it's not corrected within 10 days of being notified or an entry of judgment for damages, then again, the similar provision that the damages must be increased to not more than $1,000 each day until that security freeze is properly imposed. They really have to pay attention to these timelines because there are penalties for not properly doing what they are requested to do within those time frames. And again, you can also start a civil action in civil court in South Carolina to enjoin and restrain any future acts that are a similar violation of the chapter to what you sued for. And again, cumulative and in addition to other claims that you might have under different laws. And it also does not apply if the person is acting reasonably and was not negligent, not willfully or grossly negligent. Okay, well, we're gonna conclude with these 2 identity theft toolkits because we're, focusing on repairing the damage that may be caused to your credit or to your, your life in general when your identity is stolen, including, as we discussed, someone being convicted of a crime that is using your name and it wasn't you. So that's really important to know about. But these toolkits have a lot of good information. Federal Trade Commission, which is the federal department, and then our in South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs is a great identity theft unit. Both of these have toolkits that help you walk through all the different things that you need to do if you're a victim of identity theft. And they do cover everything that we talked about in the first episode of this series, and then everything we've talked about today. And they are, they have these units at the federal level and at the state level so that they can do what they can to help. So it's always important, I think, not only to do a police report, but to also report to these agencies because they need to know anything they can about identity theft so that they can hopefully increase their ability to catch these identity thieves. All right. Now let's see if anybody has any questions. Let me look over here. Don't see any questions, but if you do have any questions, or you can always put a comment in on our YouTube channel on the Level Up Law playlist where this recording will be located. And so I encourage you to do that if you've had issues like this and you need some guidance on asserting your rights that we've talked about both last week and this week. You can apply for our services here at South Carolina Legal Services, and I'll show that information one last time. But also, I do encourage everyone to scan this QR code and give us any requests that you have on topics for Level Up Law. We really want to know what you want to hear about, and if it's within our area of some expertise, then we want to provide it to you. And if not, sometimes we bring in our partners or others to help us out. So definitely scan that QR code. And remember to connect with us. We really do appreciate everyone being here today live, or if you're on the replay on YouTube, appreciate you checking this out. And be sure, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do go ahead and subscribe to it and sign up for those notifications so that you can get notified every time we're posting any kind of video, not just episodes of Level Up Law, but all the other video resources that we upload. And then I would also encourage you to check out our Law Help page where we have information about identity theft as well. But thank you for joining. We appreciate our audience on Level Up Law, and thank you for being here. And I do want to encourage you to check out our calendar on our website at www.sclegal.org, where you can always find the current or the upcoming episodes of Level Up Law. We have some great ones coming up for you. Our office will be closed next Tuesday, but we will have a link for you on our calendar of replays of some previous episodes about holiday scams. So that's, I think, a little relevant to the current times. And also coming up in January, you're going to have some important wage and employment information for you, and also some information about why it's important to report your income. And then we will also be having a session on the South Carolina Financial Protection Act. So please subscribe, go to our website, check out our social media. We really appreciate everyone who does that for us. It really helps us get all of this great information out to you. So with that, again, thank you for joining us, and be sure to join us every Tuesday at noon for Level Up Law, hosted by South Carolina Legal Services. And I want to also thank producer Kenneth Elliott, who I did not mention at the beginning, but he is always there in the background making sure that we get good information to you and that all the technology bells and whistles are covered. I'm Susan Ingalls, Senior Staff Attorney and Consumer Law Unit Head at South Carolina Legal Services, tuning out for 2023. We'll see y'all in 2024. Take care, everybody.